Why do the descendants of Isaac and Ishmael still find themselves locked in an eternal struggle? The tension between Jews and Arabs has stretched over millennia, rooted in a promise made to Abraham. But is there more to this ancient conflict than what meets the eye? Could it be that the real story has been hidden for centuries, waiting to be uncovered? What if I told you that the Bible holds the key to understanding not only why this conflict began, but also how it could one day be healed? In this video, we will dive deep into the foundations of one of history's oldest struggles. You will discover the incredible, often shocking, truth behind God's promise to Abraham and how this promise set the stage for everything that has happened since. From the birth of Isaac and Ishmael to the prophecies that still echo today, we'll uncover how these two brothers' fates intertwine in ways you never expected. Get ready to learn why the conflict between Isaac and Ishmael continues to shape the modern world and what divine path could lead to their ultimate reconciliation. This is more than a story about land, identity, or power. It's a spiritual journey that could change the way we view conflict and peace. In just a few minutes, you'll see how this ancient story connects to today's headlines and why understanding these biblical roots might just be the key to a future of peace. Stay with me, and let's unlock the answers together. As you watch, think about this. Can true peace between Isaac and Ishmael ever come to fruition? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video if you believe the world needs to hear this powerful truth. The beginning of the conflict, God's promise to Abraham. In the book of Genesis, we find the story of Abraham, a man chosen by God to be the father of many nations. God promised Abraham that his descendants would be as numerous as the stars, a divine blessing to all people on earth. This promise was not just a simple declaration, it was a covenant, a sacred bond that would shape the course of history. But the road to fulfillment was not an easy one. Abraham and his wife Sarah had waited for years for this promise to come to fruition. As the years passed, the reality of Sarah's barrenness weighed heavily upon them. Desperation grew in Sarah's heart. The promise seemed impossible. In her distress, she took matters into her own hands and offered her servant Hagar to Abraham so that he might have a child through her. Hagar bore Abraham a son, Ishmael. But this decision, born out of impatience and doubt, was not in line with God's perfect plan. While Ishmael was a blessing in his own right, the promise of the covenant was not meant to pass through him. The tension between Sarah and Hagar and the strained relationship between Ishmael and Isaac marked the beginning of a conflict that would echo for centuries. It was only when Abraham was 99 years old that God reaffirmed his promise. Sarah, though advanced in age, would bear a son, and that son, Isaac, would carry the covenant. The divine promise was to be fulfilled, not through human intervention, but through God's perfect timing. But by then, the damage had been done. The rift between Isaac and Ishmael had already begun. Sarah, fearful for Isaac's inheritance, demanded that Hagar and Ishmael be cast out. This was not just a family dispute, it was a spiritual battle, a struggle between human effort and divine purpose. The division between Isaac and Ishmael symbolizes the beginning of a conflict that would extend far beyond the household of Abraham, affecting the nations for generations. From that moment on, the descendants of Isaac would carry the covenant of God, while Ishmael's descendants, though not part of the covenant, would become a great nation. The lesson here is clear. Trust in God's timing and his plan, even when it seems impossible. Abraham's attempt to fulfill God's promise through his own means only led to division. How often do we, too, take matters into our own hands, trying to rush the fulfillment of God's promises in our lives? Yet God's will cannot be thwarted by human interference. His plans are perfect, and his timing is always right. When we surrender to his will, we find peace and fulfillment, even in the waiting. Isaac and Ishmael. two brothers with diverging paths. The story of Isaac and Ishmael is not just a tale of two brothers, it is a story of two paths, one of blessing and one of struggle. When Sarah saw Ishmael mocking Isaac, she demanded that Hagar and Ishmael be cast out. This moment, recorded in Genesis chapter 21, 8-10, marks the beginning of a deep and lasting division between the two brothers. But this was not just a sibling rivalry. It was a reflection of the spiritual struggle for inheritance. Isaac, the child of promise, carried the covenant of God. Ishmael, the firstborn, had once been Abraham's heir, but with Isaac's birth, the promise shifted. The bitterness that arose between the two brothers mirrored the larger conflict between their descendants, one destined to carry God's covenant and the other to become a great nation, but not through the divine promise. Isaac's descendants would go on to form the Jewish nation, the people chosen by God to carry out his plan of salvation. Ishmael's descendants would form the Arab nations, their resilience and independence becoming defining characteristics. The conflict between Isaac and Ishmael was not just about land or inheritance. It was a spiritual battle for identity and purpose. The division between Isaac and Ishmael has been reflected in the struggles between Jews and Arabs for centuries. The descendants of Isaac, through the covenant, have faced persecution and hardship, yet they have endured. The descendants of Ishmael, marked by their independence and strength, have also faced countless challenges. Both peoples have been shaped by their ancestral legacy, each struggling to understand their place in God's plan. The story of Isaac and Ishmael teaches us a profound lesson about divine purpose and human effort. While Abraham's attempt to fulfill God's promise through Hagar led to division, God remained faithful to both sons. The lesson here is that God's will be done, regardless of human interference. His plan is not dependent on our efforts, but on his sovereignty. And even in the midst of division and struggle, God's promises remain intact. In our own lives, we often face struggles of identity and purpose. We wrestle with the question of who we are and what God has called us to do. But just as God had a plan for Isaac and Ishmael, he has a plan for each of us. The key is to trust in his timing and his guidance, knowing that his plan is always greater than our own. The prophecy of Ishmael, a sign of independence and conflict. In Genesis 16:12, when the angel of the Lord speaks to Hagar, he gives a prophecy about Ishmael that would shape the future of his descendants. Ishmael is described as a wild donkey of a man, whose hand will be against everyone, and everyone's hand against him. This prophecy paints a picture of a people marked by independence, conflict, and resilience. The wild donkey was known for its untamable nature, symbolizing freedom, a refusal to be controlled, and a spirit of survival. For the descendants of Ishmael, this prophecy spoke to a people who would refuse to be subdued, a people who would face adversity and still endure. The image of the wild donkey was not an insult, but a powerful symbol of a people who would survive and thrive despite the challenges they faced. This prophecy has been fulfilled throughout history. The Arab nations, descended from Ishmael, have faced countless challenges, internal divisions, wars, and external conflicts. Yet they have remained resilient, building powerful empires and making significant contributions to culture, science, and religion. The prophecy of Ishmael's descendants as a wild donkey speaks to their fierce independence and determination to survive, even in the face of great adversity. But the prophecy also speaks to the internal conflicts that have marked the Arab world. Just as the wild donkey cannot be tamed, the Arab nations have struggled with unity, facing internal divisions such as the Sunni-Shia split in Islam. These divisions have often led to conflict both within the Arab world and with outside forces. Yet even in the midst of these struggles, God's promise to Ishmael remains true. He would become a great nation. History has proven this prophecy true as the Arab nations have risen to power and influence. But the path to greatness has not been without conflict. The lesson here is that while independence and resilience are virtues, they can also lead to division and strife, if not tempered with unity and cooperation. Just as the wild donkey's strength lies in its ability to endure, the strength of Ishmael's descendants lies in their resilience. But this resilience must be harnessed in a way that brings peace, not conflict. The prophecy of Ishmael reminds us that even in the midst of struggle, God's plans are unfolding. Even when the road is difficult, His promises are not abandoned. As we look at the world today, we can see how the prophecy of Ishmael continues to shape the modern world. The Arab nations, with their fierce independence and resilience, continue to play a major role in global politics and culture. Yet, just as Ishmael's story is marked by both conflict and blessing, the nations of the Arab world are still on a journey toward fulfillment, a journey that must embrace both their independence and their need for unity. The story of Isaac and Ishmael is not just an ancient tale. It is a story that continues to unfold in our world today. The conflict between these two brothers, one marked by the covenant and the other by independence, shapes the relationships between Jews and Arabs, between Israel and the Arab nations. But the story also holds a message of hope. For even in the midst of conflict, God's promises remain true. His divine plan is at work, and reconciliation, though difficult, is still possible. The question remains, can the descendants of Isaac and Ishmael find peace with one another? The answer, according to the Bible, lies in God's divine plan. Just as Isaac and Ishmael were divided, but God's promise to both was fulfilled, so too can the nations find a way to reconcile. The challenge is not in the promise, but in our willingness to trust in God's plan and timing. The expulsion of Hagar and Ishmael. Conflict beyond the family. The story of Hagar and Ishmael's expulsion from Abraham's household is one of profound heartbreak. Sarah, in her fear for Isaac's inheritance, demanded that Hagar and her son be cast out. For Abraham, this decision was not just a matter of family discord. It was a painful separation from his firstborn son, Ishmael, the child of his own flesh. Imagine the anguish Abraham must have felt. His heart was torn between his love for Ishmael and the command of God. Even though Ishmael was not the chosen one to carry the covenant, God assured Abraham that Ishmael would also be blessed. But the human heart, in its frailty, often struggles to reconcile divine will with personal love. For Abraham, this was not simply a family dispute. It was a spiritual decision, a moment where God's plan took precedence over personal affection. The expulsion of Hagar and Ishmael marks the beginning of a deeper, more profound conflict, a conflict that extends far beyond the boundaries of Abraham's tent. This moment foreshadowed the tensions that would arise between Isaac's descendants and Ishmael's, a conflict that would span millennia. The Israelites and the Arab nations, born from Isaac and Ishmael respectively, would continue to struggle for identity, land, and divine favor. But this story also reminds us of the difficulty of accepting God's plan when it goes against our desires. Abraham's pain in sending away Ishmael is an emotion that many of us can relate to. How often do we face difficult choices that tear at our hearts? How often do we struggle to accept God's timing or His decisions for our lives? Abraham's willingness to obey God, even when it meant separating from his beloved son, serves as a powerful example of faith. It is a reminder that sometimes following God's will requires painful decisions and sacrifices. Yet, even in this heartbreaking moment, God's promise to Ishmael remained intact. This serves as a powerful lesson that God's blessings are not limited by our human understanding of justice or fairness. While Isaac carried the covenant, God's grace and blessing were still upon Ishmael. This reminds us that no matter how difficult or unfair life may seem, God is always faithful to His promises, even when we don't see the whole picture. And God's provision for Ishmael. Hope, even in despair. When Hagar and Ishmael were cast into the wilderness, it seemed as though all hope was lost. Alone in the desert, with nothing but the harsh sun and the overwhelming sense of abandonment, Hagar was at the end of her rope. She wandered aimlessly, desperate for water, knowing that her son's life hung in the balance. In a moment of utter despair, she laid Ishmael down under a bush and walked away, unable to bear witness to her son's suffering. But then, in the midst of her darkest moment, God intervened. The angel of the Lord appeared to Hagar, reassuring her that Ishmael would not die in the desert. He pointed her to a well of water, offering her the sustenance she desperately needed. And not only did God provide for them in their physical need, but he also reaffirmed his promise to make Ishmael the father of a great nation. This moment in the wilderness is a striking illustration of God's mercy and faithfulness. Even when we feel forsaken, when it seems like all hope is lost, God's provision is never far away. Hagar's despair turned into joy as God provided exactly what she needed. In our own lives, we too face moments of darkness and uncertainty. We all experience times when we feel lost, abandoned, or forgotten. Yet, just as God provided for Hagar and Ishmael in the wilderness, he promises to provide for us in our time of need. God's provision is not always immediate, and it is not always in the form we expect, but it is always sufficient. In those moments of despair, we must remember that God is faithful to his promises, and he will not abandon us, even when it seems like we are alone. The story of Hagar and Ishmael teaches us that God's love and care extend far beyond the covenant with Isaac. It is a reminder that God's grace is for all people, not just those who are part of a particular covenant. His blessings are not confined to one nation or group. They extend to all who call on his name. This is the essence of God's mercy and grace. He is faithful to all his promises, even to those who seem far removed from the center of his covenant. The legacy of Isaac and Ishmael, an unending struggle. The legacy of Isaac and Ishmael continues to shape the world we live in today. Their descendants, the Jewish people and the Arab nations, are still engaged in struggles that echo the division that began with the two brothers. The conflict over land, identity, and divine favor is not just a historical event. It is an ongoing struggle that plays out on the global stage. Isaac's descendants, the Jewish people, have endured centuries of persecution and hardship. Despite being scattered across the earth, they have maintained their identity as God's chosen people, bound by the covenant that was made with their forefather Abraham. The land of Israel, promised to them by God, has been a focal point of their identity and their struggle. Throughout history, the Jewish people have fought to reclaim and preserve the land that God promised them, even in the face of immense opposition. On the other hand, Ishmael's descendants, the Arab nations, have also faced their own struggles. While they were not part of the covenant that passed through Isaac, God promised that Ishmael would become a great nation. And indeed, the Arab world has risen to prominence throughout history, building powerful empires and making significant contributions to culture, science, and religion. But like the Jewish people, the Arab nations have faced their own battles for identity, sovereignty, and control over the land. The struggle between Isaac and Ishmael is not just a conflict over land, it is a struggle over legacy and divine favor. Both peoples trace their origins back to the same father, but their destinies have been marked by division. The Jewish people carry the spiritual inheritance of the covenant, while the Arab nations are marked by their resilience and independence. The legacy of these two brothers has shaped the history of the Middle East and continues to influence global politics today. The lesson we can draw from the legacy of Isaac and Ishmael is that division and conflict are often the result of human pride, misunderstanding, and the desire for control. The struggle for identity and inheritance continues to fuel tensions between Jews and Arabs. But as we look at the history of these two nations, we also see moments of unity and reconciliation. The possibility for peace is real, but it requires humility, understanding, and a willingness to seek God's will. In the end, the legacy of Isaac and Ishmael teaches us that the divisions of the past do not have to define the future. While the conflict may seem endless, God's plan is greater than human division. Just as Isaac and Ishmael were separated, but both received God's blessings, so too can their descendants find a way to reconcile and fulfill God's plan for them. The question is not whether peace is possible, but whether we are willing to embrace God's will and work toward reconciliation. God's promises are true, and His plan will ultimately bring about healing and restoration for all who trust in Him. Hope for peace through prophecy. Reconciliation between two nations. In the heart of the Bible, there is a powerful moment that offers hope for reconciliation between two of the world's most divided peoples, descendants of Isaac and Ishmael. Despite centuries of conflict, the Bible speaks of a time when these two brothers, representing two nations, will find a way to come together. In Genesis 25:9, after the death of their father, Abraham, Isaac, and Ishmael are described as coming together to bury him. This act, though seemingly simple, holds a profound message of reconciliation, a sign that peace is possible even after generations of enmity. The Bible tells us that these two brothers, who were once so divided by their inheritance and by the promise of God, found a common ground in their shared love for their father. It's a glimpse of what could be, the possibility that despite the deep divisions and centuries of conflict, reconciliation is not only possible, but is a part of God's plan. This act of reconciliation offers more than just hope for the descendants of Isaac and Ishmael. It's a message for the world. It reminds us that unity does not always mean agreement on every issue, but rather a shared commitment to peace, mutual respect, and understanding. The division between Isaac and Ishmael was not just about land, it was about legacy, identity, and the divine favor that each felt entitled to. And yet, even in the face of such tension, the Bible tells us there can be moments of healing. This prophecy offers a vision of a future where the descendants of Isaac and Ishmael can find a way to live together in peace. It calls for the dismantling of walls built over centuries, spiritual, political, and social. In a world marked by division, the hope of reconciliation through shared faith and mutual respect stands as a beacon for all who seek peace. The act of Isaac and Ishmael coming together, even in their pain, shows us that true reconciliation is not an impossible dream but a real possibility, one that will require humility, forgiveness, and an unwavering faith in God's promises. A future of peace, the Abraham Accords, and the hope of reconciliation. In recent years, the world witnessed an unexpected but deeply significant shift in the Middle East, the signing of the Abraham Accords in 2020. These agreements, which saw Israel, the United Arab Emirates, and Bahrain come together to normalize relations, hold immense prophetic significance. The name itself, Abraham Accords, echoes the common ancestry shared by Jews and Arabs, the same Abraham whose story has defined the destinies of two nations for millennia. For many, the Abraham Accords were more than just a political agreement. They represented a moment of divine intervention. The promise of reconciliation, made centuries ago in the pages of the Bible, began to take root in the real world. The Accords were a reminder that despite deep historical divisions, the possibility of peace is always within reach, especially when nations acknowledge their shared heritage and look beyond past grievances. However, the path to peace is not easy. The Abraham Accords represent a small but significant step in the right direction. They are a sign that reconciliation between the descendants of Isaac and Ishmael, though fraught with challenges, is not out of reach. The question remains, will this moment of unity lead to lasting peace, or will the deep wounds of history continue to shape the future? What the Abraham Accords show us is that while true peace may not come overnight, it is possible when we are willing to confront the past, embrace our shared heritage, and work toward a common future. Just as Isaac and Ishmael found a way to reconcile in the burial of their father, so too can nations find a way to heal their wounds. The Abraham Accords serve as a reminder that peace, even in the midst of long-standing conflict, is not only a possibility, but a divine promise waiting to be fulfilled. The role of Jesus in reconciliation, building a new humanity. The ultimate hope for reconciliation, however, does not rest solely in human efforts or political agreements. The Bible offers the ultimate solution, Jesus Christ. In Ephesians chapter 2, 14-16, Paul writes that Christ is our peace, who has made both one and has broken down the dividing wall of hostility. Through Jesus, the walls that divide humanity, whether they are political, racial, or religious, can be torn down. His mission was not to perpetuate division, but to offer a path to true peace. Jesus' life, death, and resurrection are the foundation of the new humanity, a humanity that transcends the divisions of the past. The coming of Christ marked the fulfillment of God's plan to reconcile not just Israel and the Arab nations, but all of humanity to himself. In him, the spiritual inheritance of both Isaac and Ishmael is fulfilled, not through lineage, but through faith. Jesus doesn't take sides in the ancient conflict between Isaac and Ishmael. Instead, he creates a new identity, a new humanity that is united in him. This is the message of the gospel, that through Jesus there is no longer Jew or Gentile, Arab or Jew, but all are one in Christ. He is the ultimate peacemaker, the one who reconciles us not just to each other, but to God. Jesus did not come to perpetuate the divisions between Isaac and Ishmael, but to offer a new path forward, one where peace and reconciliation are possible through him. For Christians, the challenge is not simply to wait for peace to come, but to be active participants in the work of reconciliation. In Matthew chapter 5:9, Jesus says, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God." This call to be peacemakers is not passive. It requires effort, humility, and the willingness to forgive. It is not enough to wait for others to make the first move. As followers of Christ, we are called to actively seek peace, to build bridges where there were once walls, and to extend grace even to those who have wronged us. The role of Jesus in reconciliation is not just spiritual, it is practical. Through his teachings, he showed us how to live in peace with one another. He called us to love our enemies, to turn the other cheek, and to pray for those who persecute us. These teachings, though difficult, are the path to true reconciliation. The message of reconciliation is not just for Jews and Arabs, it is for the whole world. Jesus' sacrifice on the cross opened the door for all people to come into a right relationship with God and with each other. Through him, the walls that divide us can come down, and we can begin the work of building a new humanity, a humanity that is united in Christ, free from division, and marked by peace. As we look at the world today, we see the need for reconciliation in every corner. The divisions between nations, between races, between families, and even within our own hearts, are more pronounced than ever. But the hope we have as Christians is that through Jesus, these walls can come down. He is our peace, and through him we can build a new humanity, a humanity that reflects God's love, grace, and mercy to the world. In the end, the story of Isaac and Ishmael is not just about two brothers from ancient times. It is a story that continues to unfold today, a story of division, but also of hope. The Abraham Accords represent a step toward peace between the descendants of Isaac and Ishmael. But the ultimate reconciliation can only come through Jesus Christ, the one who has broken down the dividing walls and made us all one in him. As we look to the future, we can hold on to the hope that through Christ, all things can be made new. The journey we've taken today, diving deep into the stories of Isaac and Ishmael, transcends ancient history. It speaks to our lives now, to the divisions we see in the world, and to the hope that can transform even the most broken relationships. The story of these two brothers, born from the same father, but separated by destiny, conflict, and the struggles for legacy, reminds us of the deep pain of division, but it also speaks powerfully to the possibility of reconciliation, to the moment when even the most divided can find common ground, just as Isaac and Ishmael did, even in their shared sorrow at their father's passing. What a beautiful truth that even in the midst of generations-long conflict, God's promises stand unshaken. From the very first step of this ancient journey, when Abraham's hope faltered, to the final moment when Isaac and Ishmael came together, there has always been the thread of divine grace, grace that doesn't favor one over the other, but seeks to heal, unite, and restore. This is the divine story of humanity, not just the Jewish people or the Arab nations, but all people. It is a reminder that the work of reconciliation is not limited by time, by borders, or by bloodlines. It is an eternal truth. The love and grace of God have the power to heal even the deepest divides. But let's not just look at this ancient tale as something that's far removed from us. The promise of reconciliation, the path of peace, and the story of Isaac and Ishmael are more than just historical accounts. They are stories that unfold every day, in our lives, in our relationships, in the world around us. Each time we choose forgiveness over resentment, understanding over hatred, love over division, we are part of this great narrative of reconciliation. Just as God worked through history to bring healing to a divided family, He is at work in our hearts, in our communities, and in our world today. I hope that as you've watched this video, something within you has been stirred. Maybe it's a sense of hope, a glimpse of the possibility of peace, or perhaps a new understanding of the profound power of divine love and reconciliation. The challenges we face today are not so different from those faced by Isaac and Ishmael. We too are called to wrestle with division, with the wounds of the past, and with the struggle for identity and belonging. But just as God promised to bless both Isaac and Ishmael, He promises to bless all of us, no matter our background, no matter the divisions we face. I invite you to pause and reflect on this message. Is there an area of your life, a relationship, or a situation where reconciliation seems impossible? Maybe you've been carrying the weight of conflict for years, and the path to peace feels blocked. The good news is that just as God provided a way for Hagar and Ishmael in the wilderness, He provides a way for us too. The journey to peace may be long, and it may require sacrifice and humility, but it is never without hope. As we embrace this message of reconciliation, let it also be a call to action. Jesus Christ, the ultimate peacemaker, has shown us that true peace is possible. Through Him, all things can be made new. The walls that divide us, whether between nations, cultures, or even hearts, can be torn down. The story of Isaac and Ishmael offers a glimpse of this hope, but the full realization of peace comes through the work of Jesus Christ in our lives. If this video has touched you in any way, if it has helped you see the possibility of reconciliation in your own life or the world around you, I invite you to share this message. Like, subscribe, and share this video with others who might need to hear this word of hope. It is in spreading these messages of peace, love, and reconciliation that we contribute to God's greater work in the world. If you feel that this video has added value to your heart and soul, if it's helped you find light in moments of darkness, then I ask you to consider supporting this channel, to continue the work of sharing God's word and hope with the world. Every bit of support, whether it's a simple like, a thoughtful comment, or even a word of encouragement, means the world to me. Your engagement fuels the creation of more content, that can help spread these messages of peace and love. And while we all know that the work of spreading hope can sometimes feel overwhelming, it's the little acts of support, the small moments of connection that truly make a difference. Thank you, from the bottom of my heart, for being a part of this journey. If you feel moved by the message shared here, and if you want to see more videos like this, I encourage you to show your support in any way you feel led. Know that you are not just supporting a channel, but you are contributing to a movement of reconciliation and healing. Every step toward peace, every small act of love, matters. Together we can help build a world that reflects God's perfect plan, a world where reconciliation, healing, and unity are no longer distant dreams but living realities. So let us move forward in faith, with the hope that through Christ, true peace is not just possible, but inevitable. May God bless you, and may His peace be with you always.